we wanted to start out with a conversation. We have Dave, Phil, and myself, and we're just going to introduce ourselves. If you want, I'll start out. So my name is Barbara Horne, and I work with these guys in Athletes United for Peace, a NGO for the United Nations and a not-for-profit. My background is two major areas. I'm in IT. So I work with data and analytics, and I work with information technology as a contractor. I go to different companies, but I've also been a lifelong organizer. So against police brutality, for various areas of voting rights, for elected school board. So throughout the community, and that's how I ended up meeting Phil through a friend of his that has passed, a guy named Moses Williams out of New Brunswick. So what we're working on now is really a variety of things, but the focus is economic justice. So economic justice in terms of a wide vision of the world where people have what they need. They have safety, they have clean water, they have clean air, they have access to healthcare, access to housing, access to education, but also framing this economic justice in terms of reparative justice for people of African descent. So in a wide vision, all working people, but reparative justice, and again, my focus for reparative justice would be with people of African descent. And then as we go along, we can explore these concepts a little bit further, but Bill, you can go ahead maybe and introduce yourself and say what you're working on.
Well, I really want you to talk more, but I will talk because you didn't even talk about your UN conferences you've been to and some of the things, and we didn't talk about sexism and racism and isms and stuff. So my name is Phillip Shinnick, and I'm the founder of Athletes United for Peace. And of course, Dave has been the president for almost 40 years, and Barbara has joined, almost 10 years ago on the board. And she's our chief financial officer. And so who am I? Well, I practice medicine. I'm a doctor. I do both allopathic and oriental medicine for almost 35 years. I'm an ideological dissent. I was kicked out of Rutgers for creating peace. My whole focus has been peace. And you know, it sounds like peace is sort of a calm, peaceful thing. But when you work on peace, you get hammered by both of the warring factions. When I did peace with China and Russia, and I traveled extensively, I got hammered by the Chinese people, I got hammered by the American people, I got hammered by the Russian people. So peace is not so peaceful to do. But in my heart, if I don't work on peace, I'm not peaceful. So why do I do this peace work for all these years? Because if I think about the world, I might as well croak and die because it's such a disaster. But working on peace brings peace to me. So it's selfish, but on the other hand, it prolongs my life. And I'm very concerned about what's happening now. And what's happening now is a cycle. And I want to say, I don't want to talk too long, but in 1962, the games of the new emerging forces, GENEFO, where all the emerging nations got together because of what was happening in the world. The capitalists were against the communists. And so they went in Jakarta and Indonesia, and they had these games, and they set 5 world records, and it was a huge success throughout the emerging world. And all the people in the emerging world, the third nations, were there. United States were so shocked by this emerging nation, which is happening now, again, 50 years later, that we had Korea and we had Vietnam. So always the response to the emerging nation has been more war. I'm hoping that AUP and sport can be a part of the modern emerging nations, not leading to one more war, but in fact, there is another war. And this is a cycle. And there was a cycle in the 80s, which Dave and I were involved in, creating peace, getting China in the Olympics, the Soviet Union. And so what happened is that when the Soviet Union broke up, there was an implicit and formal treaties that there would be no militarization of Eastern Europe, and that NATO was no longer important. And so what we saw now is the exact opposite of why we went for peace. We're in the same position. So it's a very dangerous position. And I feel that athletes are going to really help. And why is that? For example, in tennis, I have a very close relationship with Djokovic, and we talked about this. And what we've decided is that there should be sports competitions throughout the world during wars, because athletes are not responsible for what the governments do. And we were involved, Dave, you and I remember the 1980 boycott. I got hammered by President Carter and was able to publish in the New York Times to try to get this reversed, because the Soviet Union was in Afghanistan. And of course, we were there for 10 years. So I feel history goes in cycles. It's first this repression and then that. So we're at a really crucial stage, not only in climate change, but in war. And my position is very similar to China's, which is that anytime you have a dispute, you should have negotiation. And the negotiation should be this: you criticize whoever you're talking to, and then you criticize yourself on what you could do to make the situation better. And everything is now one-sided. I hear at all levels right now, everything against China. You read the New York Times, everything against Russia. And in my heart, I love the Chinese people, I love the Russian people, and I love the people of the world. I do not like nationalism, and that's what's driving that, plus the control of natural resources. So there has never been a greater need for Athletes United for Peace than exactly this moment.
All right, Dave, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, top that one. Okay. Thank you, Phil. No, you basically laid it out. My name is David Meggyesy, and I'm a longtime friend and associate of Phil Shinnick's. And God, where did I start? I was a professional football
SDS.
player. What?
You started with SDS.
Yeah, started doing in SDS. I was involved with that, and then with my good friend Mike James, and I wrote a book called Out of Their League, which was a best seller. Was the first book that was critical of the way we are doing sport, and certainly for football, it was my autobiography, and it made a good splash in the pool, so to speak. And then I went off to doing a lot of speaking and all the rest, and then I did lots of other things as a carpenter and a builder. And then I went, I taught at Stanford for 3 years for sports consciousness and social change for the football players. And that was a really nice experience. And then I did 25 years with the NFL Players Association, which is the labor union for the NFL players. And basically we changed the system radically. We basically, the phrase I use is, we won the war. And I was part of that change. which the late Gene Upshaw, who was our executive director. And so now we've that distribution of wealth in that system, professional football, is now 50-50. When I started, the owners, they had 70% of it, and we, the players, got only 30% of it. So I think when you really look at the bottom line of how we're looking at the world, economic justice and the distribution of wealth is the base concept, activity that people have to deal with personally, socially, politically, and so forth. And so how we change that view to make economic justice more equitable and fair, and that drives creativity. It really does. And the creativity that we need to deal with in this pivotal time in world and human history. And it really is that pivotal time. So when we come around to looking at our organization, Evo Sports, Athletes United for Peace, these various organizations, as Phil is saying, its bottom line is about peace. It's not about war, and it's not about killing each other. But humans have a long, long history of killing each other. And the biggest change that we have to do now to make that view, to change that view. And so my view is the idea of consciousness, the expanded awareness, Jesus talked about it, the Buddha talked about it, the Muslim people many people have talked about it, and how do you put it into practice so we can live in a peaceful world that involves a lot of competition, but not killing each other. So Athletes United for Peace is about athletic competition, and it is also about peace. So
Well, I
bottom
think,
line. Okay.
I agree on the idea of, the redistribution of wealth. I think that's critical. And like Phil mentioned, I didn't forget, a lot of my work is going into the UN and putting out certain documents, and some of the stuff that I'm talking about, like I said, is economic justice, which requires the redistribution of wealth.
Absolutely.
I think, I think it's important, to deal with it on the larger scale, because we can do it on the smaller scale and it does help, but the impact isn't as vast. So for example, I spent probably more than 10 years studying Shotokan with a women's karate club in New York City. And one of the things that this club did was make Shotokan accessible to any woman who wanted to take it. And
That's
we
wonderful.
had very reflective of New York. We had women of all different religious backgrounds. You had Muslims, you had Jewish women, all in the same dojo. The woman who led it for years was a woman named Denise Williams, who was a Black woman out of Brooklyn. The woman who started it, I think in the 70s, was a woman named Susan Ribner. And we were under the Japanese Karate Association, but
Well,
we existed as an all women's dojo, I think for close to 40 years in New York. And like I said, I studied with them for about 10 years and got my
well,
black belt in Shotokan. And if any woman wanted to join in and she didn't have the money, she was still able to join. And that's great, but there's only so much of an impact you can make on that smaller scale. So things like that work, but they also need to be adopted into the larger society. They need to be set forth in the policy. It needs similar concepts need to be set forth in law so that it can be easily accessible for everyone. So that wide scale view is important. And I think if consciousness helps people get there, that's great. But even if they're not conscious, those of us
yeah,
who see the need for that can still push for it.
sure.
So just to set that out there.
Well, no, but I think the dialectic, not the dialectic really, but the individual to the social. How do you do that? And when you say athletes united for peace, what does that mean? Well, there's, as Phil was saying, okay, yeah, we have an organization. Then what is the work? What are we aiming for to um to make, in my view, people's expanding their minds or sensibilities about uh that why does peace matter for them and for their family and their society and you go up the line. So, and then I think the other question is we are so fortunate as elite athletes, how we can influence larger people and younger people, particularly because Phil and I are pretty old now. We're in our 80s. So, so that idea of the younger people, they're certainly aware of what the hell's going on and how sport can come into about peace and social justice and an awareness of what is going on in the world and get educated about it all, uh, would be a very positive thing to do. But it's crazy because every now and then we have our organizations, there's many of them throwing it out into the world. Is it sticking? You know what I mean? It's throwing the whatever the thing on the tomato on the wall kind of thing. So to me, that's, I think, at this stage of my life, trying to expanding the awareness of what we're talking about now is most essential, and how we do it programmatically, and so it sticks with people's brain. And sometimes I think I just hit them in a shot like in their head. They go, get it? But the metaphor that I've used a lot, it just popped into my brain when I was writing some notes about this, is the metaphor is like we get covered over with our social, political, economic systems when we're little kids, right? And then we get educated, right? And then we would develop a view, a perspective. What's right or wrong, that kind of thing. And the metaphor I use, if we can release the ping pong ball under the water, and you release it, it pops to the surface. That makes sense? So part of what we're doing, we're trying to release if you will, quote, false views of reality. Okay? Because we know if we really get into it, we know what reality, or have a sense of it, because the quantum guys basically laid it out. If you really want to do a discourse about that. Do you see what I'm saying? And historically, we have been developing. When you look at the number of the democratic societies, and certainly there is democracy in the world, and these systems, these democratic systems, get taken over by elites. Okay. And that triggers war. I mean, I get on and on. I'll stop. Do you see what I'm saying? So the release process is also part of it. You don't have to put anything there. And both of you know, and all of us do meditation, various forms that we do it. Why are we doing this? In part because when you meditate, you're releasing the thought forms in your being, or your feelings, your sense of it, and you step back a step, say, oh wow, these are just a view. These are views. These are thoughts. Beyond these thoughts, there's something larger when you drop into in a meditative process. Okay, let's look at sport. Now there's a lot of these words called the zone or the flow. Well, what does that mean? It means that you get into a, if you will, a flowing meditative state. Oh, isn't that interesting? Well, if that's so, how can people be educated about that sensibility? Would that make a positive difference in their lives, in their views?
Well,
maybe the divorce race would go down. Maybe not. Maybe the opposite. Do you see
I
what
think
I'm
now
saying?
that
So
I think
to
now,
me, when I look at sport, which is really a spiritual practice, it's a spiritual practice. And Barbara, you have a group that's a sport activity. You call it whatever it is. It could be like running. It could be, whatever. But and Mike Murphy, I mean, the great, phrases. He said, sport is like our Western yoga, because we're trying to expand our view so we can include and discriminate appropriately in the world and make the world a better place. So that's, to me, what Evo Sports is about, and about Athletes United for Peace. Same, we're parallel on the road, so to speak. Does that make sense? Sorry. Barbara, you're thinking, I don't know, I'm looking at you.
Hello. Bill, did you want to chime in?
What's that?
say that again.
I said, Phil, you were chiming in.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
sorry, Phil. I as you know, I get over the top with my verbiage, of course.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
All right. So there's a couple of things here. One, sport and consciousness, and the other is peace and international things. And
It's all connected for sure. Yeah.
So in terms of my background, I was a world-class athlete for 12 years, and
World
I'm
record
the,
holder, man. World record holder, dude.
Yeah, well, I am the world record holder in the long
You are.
jump, and I'm a good high jumper, and I ran on the 4x100 sprint relays.
Well, you're
And
an
that's
amazing, you were an amazing athlete, basically, Phil.
yeah. Well, it's pretty good for a white guy to run with all the black athletes
Whatever.
and be equal and beat them, and that's really good. And they love it. Well,
Bob Beeman beat you.
well, I beat him before he went to the Olympics 3
Yeah,
times.
he did. Then he had the.
I didn't get to
world
go to
record
the
record.
Olympics. If I was there, I think I would have done well.
There you
But
go.
let's go
That
to the
competitive
let's go to the Olympics. You said 1,500 years ago. There's been 3 Olympic Games: the modern Olympic Games, and then there was an ancient Olympic Games, the 1500 BC, and then there was one that went back 2,500 years. So we've had
I didn't know that. Oh, wow.
yeah, 3 phases. So now the Olympics is about 4,000 or 5,000 years old.
No kidding.
And in terms of my heart, Apollo is the person that I really relate to. Now he's the person that shot Achilles in the heel, and he had to give up his shield. But Apollo was the Olympic champion. But on the off years of the Olympic Games, he organized a festival of art, music, dance, and sport all together, and
Right.
And that's what I really
That was
feel.
what the
I'm
Olympics
an
were.
artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was and peace. But one of the big things in the ancient Olympics is during the Olympic game torch, and I was very involved in this. The torch went around that part of the world so that any person could travel to the Olympic Games through enemy territory. And so
Ekaharia.
I think that that's a key.
That's the word. Yeah.
Ekaharia.
The sacred
But in
discus.
terms of in terms of sport, it's very important because the mind is a monkey. I don't know whether Barbara, they talked about this in martial arts, but you really can't trust it. You have to observe it, but you don't have any say over what comes in your mind. But in sport, my success revolved around one concept. If I thought about winning the gold medal or I thought about honor, you might as well forget it. You
Right.
cannot be involved in sport if you're thinking the outcome. You have to be involved every single minute. And Dave knows that well with
No,
the
it's absolutely
linebacker
true.
for
That's
7
absolutely
years,
true.
that
Yeah.
every single play is a new play.
Yeah.
Every single moment. And Djokovic and I spent a lot of time talking about this, that once the play is over, it's not over. There's no overness on the moment.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a great phrase. Yeah. Good.
And the other thing for me is that sport is a part of nature because we move through time. We're organic beings. And one of the things about that is what you put in your mouth. So Djokovic spends a lot of time meditating, a lot of time only putting things in his body that are healthy. And so I think that sport does that because you cannot compete in sport if you're eating shit food. You know, you have
I
to
agree.
and you have to have your mind calm. So that sport has consciousness in it. You cannot be at a world-class level if you don't, if you have to stay in the moment. That's it. And you can't be distracted.
That's almost the definition of it, really.
That's it. Now, the other thing is that sport isn't a national thing. It's international. And I think now with all of the sports being more international, the athletes will be the harbinger of peace, because the more that you compete around the world, the less you think of the nationality, you know, the US against China, US against Russia. You don't think that way anymore. And also you find that we have a lot of commonality in humanity through international sport. So one of the things that we did during that time is I organized probably 500 people to go to China, to go to the Russia. So it's important that we organize international events, and a part of that. Now, Donna De Verona, who's on our board, was a person who organized the China Women Sports competition that got 100,000 people with China and the United States in the 1980s. And so sport has a great way of bringing humanity together.
Absolutely,
So I feel, so I feel that the movement is already there, and it's been going on for 5,000 years. Now, in terms, well, I can go on and on.
Well, I mean, yeah, no, it's wonderful stuff. No, it's good. Absolutely. You know, but again, you know,
I want to talk.
go ahead.
I wanted to talk about science because
Yeah.
everyone hangs their hat on science. And I have to say that you know, I am the world record holder in the long jump and a great athlete, but I've been in science now for almost 40 years, and I've been able to be with top scientists. And every single scientist that I've worked with had a spiritual life. They meditated. I don't think you can do good science. You can't do, and I don't think you can do good sports if you don't clear your mind and your consciousness isn't good. The more I meditate, and I usually meditate between 2 and 3:30 every morning in the middle of the night, and I have 2 sessions during the day, plus I do my gung fu, I play golf, I do everything. And if you do these things, you can think the things slow down, but you end up doing more. People say, Phil, how can you write books? You've got 30 articles, you do this, you do this, you do this. How can you have time? Well, you slow time down, you got plenty of time, and that is through meditation, through sport, and through consciousness. So, you know, I just feel that Evo should expand their gaze to the world, and that they should expand beyond whatever sport they're in. I see, Dave, that you've got a lot of people from a lot of different sports. And so they're doing those sports, raise their consciousness. But Athletes United for Peace is a worldview, is a human view, that we're all human. And I think that that the more we push this, the economic injustice, all of these things have to come about through connections. Right now in science, one of the Hans-Peter Drurer, the head of the Max Planck Institute, was a very good friend of mine. I think he got close to the Nobel Prize. He certainly got it in peace. And he delivered a paper, and I says, Jesus, you're all over the place. You know, you say this and that. And he said, Phil, we're at the place now where the whole system, we have to make the connections between this and that.
Exactly.
And we think they're very weak. Science will think that's a weak connection. You have to start making connections. And now Barbara's doing that right now with the African descent thing that she's doing. So the important thing now in the world is to make connections to the whole system. And we're the people that can make those connections. And they'll say, oh, you're crazy. How can you connect this to that? And we have to do that no matter how weak the connection is. We have to go forward with making connections so that it is a unity. We're the ones that are ignorant of the unity.
Barbara,
and sport does that.
Both of you right now, this is what we're doing right now.
So Barbara, talk about your stuff a little bit.
I want to say, Dave, I think one of the things that you'll like is I feel like I've noticed an increase in people just using meditation in mainstream. Like, for instance, like I said, you know, a lot of my life is in technology. So I go to different companies, and I was working on a project about 2 years ago. And some of the people I was working with, we were training different people in different technologies at one of the major finance companies. And some of the people I was working with were younger kids out of California. So in this middle of this class, we added in a 2-minute meditation break.
Nice. Good.
So we did, which is not something we used to do when I first started doing this.
Right.
But it was more commonplace to them. Or a friend of mine, she says her son is in kindergarten, and he comes in and he says, "Oh, mommy, we have to meditate on this for a while." So people are starting to
That's great.
incorporate it, at those different levels. And I think it's important, and I think it's helpful, and I don't know whether it'll get more or less divorces, but I do think it does help people clear their head, helps them communicate, and feel like you're saying, of course, we had that when we were talking about and dealing with Shotokan. I used to get hollered at all the time because it's hard for me to be in the moment. My mind is all over the place
Yeah,
with a million
exactly.
different
Yeah.
thoughts going on. So, my sensei was always reminding me that I had to be in the moment, because if somebody's throwing a punch, I need to be able to block it, and I can't do that if I'm out
Exactly.
here. I'm gonna get hit.
Distracted. Yeah.
So she's like, you're gonna get hit. So you need to be in the moment, and you need to be in the moment, and it needs to be in your body, not you in your mind thinking about it. So I do think those concepts are resonating. Uh, they're going more mainstream. So that's the good news about it all. But what was your question about what we're doing at the UN, Phil?
Yes, well, you've gone to these conferences on women, particularly of African descent. And so you've gone to these conferences and you've learned some very interesting things that are not well known about African people moving around the world and moving through Europe and the different things that are happening. I can't tell you what. I just think you should share a little of that. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we like when in April I went to a conference in Geneva, and the focus of that conference was economics for people of African descent. It's something that we'd actually asked for. So when they asked for ideas, that was something that we submitted as in
Great idea.
writing,
Yeah.
like a specific focus on economic justice. I mean, you can focus on so many different things. They did a good job. One of the things that came out that I didn't know very much about was trade routes. Not something I'm very familiar with, not something a lot of people are familiar with. But what colonialism did to Africa was it put people in a position, people who now still don't have the resources they need, where they might have to travel halfway across the world just to get to the country next door to them.
Right.
Something that we take for granted. Like if I get to, if I have to go out to California, I go to Newark Airport, I get on a flight, 6 hours, I'm out in California. This
Right.
person might have to go out east, travel for 14 hours to go another 20 hours just to get what should be 6 hours.
Yeah.
So the way things are carved up, it makes it difficult for people who are already under-resourced to actually move resources around. And then the world looks and complains and says, well, why aren't these people developed enough? Well, the way things are carved up, they didn't have the opportunity to utilize the resources to develop the countries in a way that would give them a more equity in negotiation and things like that. Phil, one of the things that, as you know, that we did a couple of years ago was with the UN, we did a panel on women in sports. And we kept it more at the community level, but we did have a couple professional athletes, a couple of coaches, some people that were college athletes, but also did work in the community. And we had this really wonderful women panel, and we had Jane Kennedy come out and moderate it for us. So she flew from California to come moderate it. She was one of the first, I think, Black women who was an announcer in sports. And it touched, I think, which surprised Phil. It touched on all the social issues, as was the goal, very easily. Like these women didn't have the resources they need. Simple things you think you would know that an athlete needs, like access to the gym, they didn't
Right.
have,
Yeah.
and they would get booted. So if there was a football game, and the guys needed the access to the gym, these women got booted. They didn't have feminine products that they needed. Obviously, if you're an athlete, you need products that's gonna allow you to play. They didn't always have the equipment they needed. So you know, we all know that Donna worked on, you know, these were her issues to get that equity in sport. But we're talking 2 years ago, where at the high school and the college level, where it should be more equitable for women, that did not exist. These girls were definitely shortchanged at all levels. And when you got to the professional level, we know they're not always paid. You know, basketball players like a Brittany Griner has to go out to Russia to play. You know, the
Exactly.
women's soccer team had won I don't know how many titles, but they were still not getting equitable pay. So those issues all are reflective of what's going on in society, and they come out in women in sports. And we had that panel, and that panel really brought it out and talked about it well.
You know, just pop into my brain. I'm just thinking about, of course, what Billie Jean did. You know, the money, and I'm wondering, just thinking about Djokovic. You know, his commentary now about what's going on. The money question. It's always about the question, and how, let's say, women's tennis is pushing education into say the Black community, you know, Hispanic community, white community. It's typically tennis is a white person's game, has been, you know. And of course, then it's amazing. Here's Arthur Ashe, you know, it's on the fucking stadium. You know what I mean? And Billie Jean, you know, as being that kind of pioneer of it all, you know. And I think Donna Dina Borono, they were colleagues, right? The Women's Sports Association, I think.
Yes,
Bill, is
Women's
that right?
Sports
Yeah,
Foundation.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I
In New York.
was at the, yeah, I was at the original meeting.
Yeah.
And
Oh, really? Yeah.
Donna was the first president. She ran the organization for about 4 years, and then
Yeah,
Billie Jean
I contacted her a number of times over time, but
took it.
anyhow, it was just a thought popped into my brain when maybe it's evolving, but I really like the idea. Well, it is that's basically divide and conquer, which is what the Western Europeans did with Africa. You know, that phrase, divide and conquer, and so and how it comes down now, even just traveling around, you know. But certainly the Chinese understand now where the real money is in Africa, the natural resources that they need and Europe needs. So to me, this, and Irving Horowitz, you know about Irving, he said this, you know, 40 years ago, we were having a conversation. He said, look, the next jump is going to be in Africa, you know, because that's where the play out of world economics and politics will be happening there. And I thought, yeah, is that right? I got it. Yeah, I guess so. But then when you see it now, it's really emerging, you know, and how we could, you know, when we say we, all of us, you know, can impact that process. And I just made a little note too, the number of Native American, African athletes are coming into the league, into the NBA as well. It's interesting, you know.
You know, let me just
And
say
certainly
that
soccer. I mean, my God, it's big time now in professional soccer, you know. So
what I
anyhow,
was going to say is that Arthur Ashe was a part of our group and a part of our
yeah,
John McEnroe was also very supportive of AUP, and he showed up to all of our functions. But I was standing with Arthur Ashe outside the United States Open. We both had megaphones, and we were we were protesting South African athletes coming there because
No
of
kidding.
apartheid.
Wow.
And he turns to me and he said, Phil, he said, these South African white athletes, he said, they're my brothers and my friends. I have more in common than even the blacks in America. And here I
Right.
am boycotting my best friend coming to the United States. He says, it breaks my heart.
Yeah.
He died of heart disease. I mean, they also gave him a transfusion that had HIV and it killed him. But
Oh, no shit.
but-
That's right. Yeah.
athletes have really taken the hit, and particularly on the forefront. And another little thing is that Muhammad Ali came to me once during the early days, and he wanted to know about Joe Frazier, but he wanted to talk about Africa, and we talked for 3 hours nonstop.
That's right. You mentioned
And-
that, Bill. Yeah.
And what I want to say is that Lee Evans and Ron Davis, founders of AUP and part of us, spent the last part of their life in Africa because they
Yep.
did not like the Jim Crows in America. And so one of the things, Barbara and I talk a lot about this, but one of the things that Lee told me is that when you look at Africa, you have to see the level of racism in the country that's colonizing. For example, the Belgians were incredibly racist. They would take a black male and put him in a cage and have no clothes on, and they'd parade him through Brussels and give him bananas. And also the French were not that great. And so when you look at a country and the Belgian Congo and the Netherlands and South Africa, so every single country in Africa, you have to see at what country had colonized them and the level of racism in that country determined. Now, interesting, England ended up the best because they set up civil service, post offices, and they trained a bureaucracy.
Well, that's what happened in
And
India.
the other
for
countries.
sure. Yeah.
So Africa really suffers still from that colonial era.
Totally.
And
Totally.
also the boundaries, and we're still fighting over these goddamn national boundaries in Ukraine. I mean, I have to take a big breath on all of this, but this bifurcation of the world definitely is not making it connected.
Right.
And
Well,
I
I
think
mean-
that athletes connect it.
Well, yes,
think-
and
Go ahead.
athletes can make the connectors. We are connectors, and you guys are both of your connectors, and Phil, you particularly, and all the work that you did internationally, and all the people that you've connected with, But again, to me, it's what's the next step? What are we doing now? And I guess I would like to say maybe we'll have another conversation to, because I stepped away from Evo and I came back about a month ago, and I thought, okay, I got 10 years left, and what am I going to do? And all the good stuff that say the sports conscious and social change, this stuff works, it's positive, it's good stuff. And how do we start connecting? And that's why I'm happy we are talking right now on September 17th, 2023. So
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking a little bit now, because there's so many vectors to go into to really, elaborate this. But on the other sense, all three of us are basically ground zero at a certain level, on how we are using our resources, our individuality and our names, to make how we shift it. But that needs a level of organization. When you think about, the women's, tennis thing, that was big. They put an organization together. So anyhow, I'm just babbling away a little bit now. So
Barbara, I
think-
do think.
I
Go
think,
ahead.
but what I do think as next steps is that there does need to be a concerted effort, like you said, to use power and influence and put it in the right place. And we do know that that means movement of resources into communities where there's need. It also means things like the email that I sent out about the people of African descent in Ukraine who couldn't get the paperwork they need to even get out of Ukraine, either for them or for their kids. They were literally put in the back of the line, and told to stand behind the white people and the white families, here
Exactly.
in 2022 and 2023. So I think as the next step, we have to look at what influence we have and then how that can go into specific, I think, existing programs and campaigns, because there's a lot of stuff out there. There is
Yes,
stuff out there
absolutely.
happening.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'm
the
not
whole
sure we
point.
need to necessarily reinvent the wheel, but we do need to say, okay, what out there is working, and what resource do we need, or resources does it need to work even better or to expand? So I think that's important. I think it needs to happen on the legal level with certain laws. It needs to happen on the policy level, and it just needs to happen with direct resources. When it comes to a conversation on Africa, we all know that's vast. But every single country, America included, has mistreated people of African descent. Like, you can point to a case like you mentioned, you say, oh, this one is worse. I don't know about that. I mean, you have cases and stories of America mistreating Black people, and I mean, we have the
All
Klan.
the time.
I mean, the stories are just atrocious across the world. And even with the Chinese and them going into Africa for the natural resources, I wonder, are these different countries in a position to negotiate with the Chinese, or are the Chinese coming in and putting demands in place? And yeah, they're bringing infrastructure, because how else do you move out natural
Well,
resources if you
yeah,
don't have
there's so
infrastructure?
many levels of it,
So
and
yeah, I mean, when you negotiate fairly, you have to negotiate with a partner in a position to negotiate. And I'm
exactly.
not sure that's happening if one side has so much and one side has so
Absolutely,
little.
totally. Yeah,
But next steps, like you said, I think would be looking at where we can put and support resources that align with our values. What is in existence currently and where we can support it.
yeah,
And
and yeah, exactly. So, and I guess what I'm saying is I think that what I said before, I'm very happy that we are connecting, and what I would like, Jennifer, and I talked to Jennifer Karkendager, our CEO, our Evo person, to and uh, you, Barbara, could talk with her, and she's real good, and she's on it, and so I making those connections is probably certainly start. That's the first things to do, and then say, okay, how can we collaborate very specifically what's going on, and so uh, for me, that's would be the best thing to a best thing to do.
So let me just say, extension of what Barbara said is that the terms of resources. Now, AUP has been in existence for 38 years.
Right.
I've lost track of how many things we've done. I don't know. One time I counted 100 different things that happened.
Right.
But AUP has had no money, and the key principle was not to invent the wheel.
Right.
Is
Right.
to partner up with existing organizations that have money and resources and partner up with them. And that's what I have done right all around the world. The China's People's Friendship Society, different organizations throughout the world that are doing this. This is what Barbara and I are doing at the United Nations. We're partnering up with other people, non-governmental agencies who are doing the same thing. So
Great.
I think that resources are very important, but also the connections between activist groups and people who are doing the same thing is our future, I feel. I looked at our bank account. I think we have $700 there now, and that's a lot of money for us. And we're probably one of the most successful organizations in the world, and we have no money. So yes, the money has to be redistributed, but I think the relationships have to be redistributed. There's plenty of resources
for both,
in the
yeah.
world.
No, yeah.
But we have to.
I've been funding. I've been funding Evo Sports, so it's. I know about the money issue. So, yeah, and what we did, we shifted to a nonprofit, a legal structure, and the idea was to start, get contributions and people who want to look at what the work we're doing, and this one guy Barry is pushing that. I'm trying to push him more from him, but basically that's, yeah, we as we said at the beginning an hour ago, is the money, the resources are certainly essential, but it's the human resources that, Phil, you've been doing for, as you say, many years, pushing AUP into the world, and so big one. Mazel tov, as they say, the Jewish people say. So what do you think? I mean, shall we, next step, shall we, what I would like to do, maybe we end this thing, is, unless you guys want to talk more, what do you think?
Well, I got to go Sunday shopping. I'm a shopper. I got to get it on the table.
So I think, Barbara, so if you and I'll talk to Jennifer, maybe you and Jennifer can talk, and but I think it would, like, for me, I would like to have AUP part of a kind of a connection, and vice versa, if you guys are interested. And I was, part of AUP many years ago, and with basically Phil, basically put it together and started it, and at the Kansas Relays, as I remember. So
Yeah.
that was a long time ago. So and what's, just the the specific relationship, at least put it together on our websites, And so, Barbara, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, like Jennifer, she can reach out whenever and let me know.
Well, I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to talk to her today and say, I was going to talking to her about our conversation, and start with there, and see if you guys can relate, and but basically we're doing very similar, parallel lines in the world, and we're also going across as the parallels. So and then my phrase is, sports consciousness and social change. I've been changing it now to sports consciousness and social action. To me, that works better for me. And so we may shift to, we're in the middle now of developing the website. If you guys, have you seen the website, Barbara?
Yeah, I went to the current one.
Yeah, see what we're doing and you know, the blog stuff and all that kind of thing. This is but to me, the social action component is absolutely essential, and that I've been doing that in my life all the time. You know, the movement, the union movement of the NFL Players Association. That's I was one of the key people in that, you know, putting that shit together. So you know, and the guys are making a whole lot of money.
Well, you'll appreciate this, Dave, that when I finally went in to finish at Rutgers, I started out science, but I ended labor studies.
Oh,
And
nice.
I love the labor department. I wish I'd found them first.
Yeah, exactly. Phil was part of, you were part of that as well, Phil, right?
Yeah, at Rutgers, yeah, the
Yeah,
Wells
Rutgers.
Kelly, yeah, Wells Kelly.
And
So
then
I
and
do
Irving
think,
was as transaction, right?
yeah, it was. I do have a suggestion in terms of Jennifer and you, Barbara, and that is, it seems to me a lot of Evo stuff is in the United States and in different sports, and some of these sports are not international, so that
Right.
therefore they don't have the opportunity to travel. And I think that consciousness comes from experiences, and so since they're not traveling around the world like an Olympian, I've traveled everywhere.
I
I've been
know
in
you've been
Africa for
amazing.
almost 2 months.
Yeah.
I was in Africa for 2 months competing. I've been in Asia. I've been in Europe. I competed in the Soviet Union. So what we can do for Evo, and Barbara, I think you will agree, is that probably those people who have the orientation to raise their understanding to a higher global level, Barbara and I can help them attend UN events and give them special passes.
Okay.
I think that this is a contribution that we can do for Evo, that there may be people who are itching to get beyond their sport and look at the world in a more sophisticated way. But you can't do that if you're not traveling around the world, and you can't do that if you don't have the proper information. So I think I think that that's a first step. And somehow we can communicate with Evo to talk about the upcoming events. And the upcoming events, there's a lot of them. Barbara and I, gee, we have 2 or 3 this month alone, you know.
Yeah, tomorrow actually. But and I went to one yesterday. But yeah, one of the biggest events at the UN is the Women's Conference in March. And we generally put together a little delegation to go to that conference. And it would be great to have it's in New York at the at
New York.
UNHQ.
Okay.
So it's in the United Nations in New York, and it would be great to have Jennifer or some
Yeah,
other.
because she knows New York very well. I mean, she's, you know, travels there a long time, you know, lots.
Okay.
So
And yeah, her
Interesting,
or some other people, men or women, who wanted to come to this conference. One of the topics this year, I think, is economics. So obviously there's going to be a lot of talk. It's usually about 20,000 people over a 2-week period.
Holy cow.
So, you know, there's a lot that happens around that. And like we said, a couple years ago, we did a panel on women in sports. It was called Girls Must Play.
Yes,
And that was our
exactly.
contribution, our panel. So yeah, that would definitely be a good next step. You know, if she reaches out, have her reach out soon, because we start registering for
Well, I'll
this
call
year.
her today. I'm going to say we have a great conversation, and you and Jennifer, Barbara connect, and then talk about this conference. And because she moves around a lot, she was just in New York, and she came back, you know, a few days ago. So, so yeah, that would be great. That would be a nice connection. You know what I mean? And this event that's at Richmond, I'll see if I can. I have to frame it in my mind so I can send it to you, or she can send it to you. That we're involved. That's that little thing you're doing. It's a race that in Richmond.
Okay, just one more thing before I go. That's the next step. The second step is that maybe Evo and Athletes United Peace can sponsor something like what Barbara, she's the chief organizer for the Girls Must Play little thing that we did. We could do something for your whole organization and expand it and have a special session that we sponsor. And when we sponsor these, we video, we edit them, and we put them on YouTube. So that would be the second step. The first step is actually going to the United Nations, being involved. The second step is actually coming up with a very a good idea that people from Evo could come to this or even be part of the panels.
Well,
and
remember, we're very small, you know, I mean, there's really four, but there's the thing that I put it together, but basically, you know, we have a little programming that basically, I'll just do a little wrap. A number of athletes and coaches have accessed consciousness perspectives. And so these like Scott Ford, you guys didn't connect, right? Phil?
no,
You and Scott? Do you butted heads a little bit, I think?
no, I don't remember anything
Scott Ford.
about.
Well,
Yeah.
He was a very good player, and then he became a coach for a long time. And he has put a system about teaching tennis. It kind of came out of the Tim Gallwey, the Inner Game of Tennis book that he published in 1972, Tim Gallwey. So that idea of, you know, self one, self two, how does that relate to the emergence of performance?
But we want to go
so,
beyond that. We want to go beyond that. And
no, I know, of course, but I'm just saying is Scott is a guy who's put this together, his own system for many, many years. Okay, so there are other people who are coaches, but are working in the consciousness vector, if you will, and not the social action vector. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's sports, consciousness, and social action. So a lot of these guys around this group, Evo, I'm the only one, and Jennifer as well, who are relating to the social issues of the day.
well, that's why they need to come to
racism, but you name
That's why
it.
they need
Okay.
to take the next step. They need to take
So the next step is to connect AUP, Evo Sports, and the individuals to say, okay, here's what we're doing. Barry Rabin, do you relate? Or maybe you don't. Fine. You see what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of people who are into the consciousness stuff, but they're not clued in to social action and social positive political action. That's what I have been doing in
there
my
might
life.
be a nice
You know what I'm saying?
when Phil, when we did our women's panel, one of the women on there, Yvonne, she was a dancer, and they're our friends on the UN. They have a group. Remember we went to that H plus performance?
Yes.
One of the things they do is they help dancers in terms of making sure they have their basic needs met, because especially in a form like hip hop dance, that it's even more difficult than it is for people that do more traditional, considered traditional dance like ballet and stuff like that. So it's a good connection point. I reached out to Yvonne a little while ago to see what they were doing for the women conference. She and I are going to have a meeting soon and, talk about what they're preparing. They're also on the younger side. A lot of their members are, young women in their 20s and maybe on the older side is in their 30s. So I think it's a good connection of sport, art, and actually helping
Yeah.
people who need help where they so some of these people I've noticed over the years, having worked with different folks, sometimes they're not into consciousness, or they're into consciousness for themselves, but it's harder for them to see the wider social picture.
Exactly.
But sometimes they do connect on the individual level when they meet certain individuals and they understand how those resources get to those people, those individuals that might
Sure.
need it. So, maybe there's a pathway there into social consciousness that we can explore. And we can see if there's a connectivity with the work that H Plus is doing, since they're dealing with a specific population and making sure they have what they need to perform and to pursue an art, and that's also a sport. So we can explore that, I think.
A
That
little
might
bit,
be a good
sure,
avenue.
yeah. I mean, there's so much around, and I think what's popped into my brain, Barbara, that in Phil, New York City is the center of so much stuff. And so what these specific organizations, sport and dance organizations, they have money or they whatever, to relate about to relate to them about the leadership of these organizations, about what AUP is doing and what Evo Sports is doing, these kind of other organizations. Do you see what I'm saying? And I don't have those kind of connections, you know. So the top, organization and organizing in tennis or running or whatever. You know what I mean? What are these? Who are these people? You know, and 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 I've thought about this a lot, and I think you and Phil, you and I have talked about this. Who are these people who are basically organizing sport competitions and trainings and da da da? You know what I mean? What the fuck? What are they doing? Do you see what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm because I do not know. I do not know. But I think that, and maybe this is just a big jump into the world kind of thing. But when you have a Djokovic who's like a world champion, he's connected to the U.S. Tennis Association kind of thing.
Well,
Do you see
he's
what I'm
trying to
saying?
start a labor union. He's trying to do what you did.
Yeah,
He's
it's
trying to
true.
get a players union together. But
Well, no, I mean it's really fucking crazy, and I'll just do an aside. So I sent this stuff together to my group, and I have this Harvard thing study that I'm part of, and it's like 20 former guys, and I sent this little thing about being clean, and I said, "Can you respond?" Zero, fucking zero. Excuse me, I'm getting crazy. So I sent it again. I said, don't be chicken shits. Respond. What I just sent you. Get it? And so when you really look at so many of these athletes, they're fucking clueless. Clueless.
well, you said something good, and that is that what AUP has always done, and I have always gone to sports associations. Remember, David, we went to the soccer associations in Russia
Yeah.
and the United States, and in a privately owned stadium in Bush, we got 80,000 people for a soccer, and we turned it into a complete peace celebration. So partnering with sports organization is key.
Yeah.
Most of the organizing that I've had have been with major organizations. They do the organizing.
Sure.
I help with all the political stuff of having the captains meet together.
There always
and-
has been that divide between the conservatives or the you know, and then the people who are wanting to, the progressives, you know, and finally, when you got a good progressive with the track association, you were able to push it out to get your world record recognized. You know, so it's and that was a huge job, Phil. My God, you know, but then they had to be, you know, a person who basically gets it and is willing to help or at least access it. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm at. I just got into that vector of who are those individuals, you know, and I believe there's a lot of coaches now who are into understanding the mind training and using the phrase that I use, these consciousness technologies that work for athletes. And most of us in the old days, we didn't have any coaching about that. You had to figure it out yourself. That's another
Well, I got
sector we can talk about too.
I got to go shop, and
Yeah, okay.
and
But I think that there's a lot of these coaches, and even the Alabama coach, you know, they're using a lot of this stuff now. I call it the inner game practices, the meditation, the visualization, these kinds of stuff, which, you know, was never happened.
well, there is a coach of the San Diego or the San Antonio Spurs who I've talked to, and he's political. He's one of the few people in the world that's political. So there are
political consciousness thing, and it's like, to me, last thing, and then I'll have to jump in on your chimp. Consciousness and politics, or the radical politics, they merge. Okay, and many times it's separate, pushed away, because the consciousness people, they don't want to deal with the political realities. And a lot of social change people, oh, what about this consciousness? That's bullshit. So you're always kind of like, and one of my things over the past fucking 30 years at least, to try to or connect these views of, if you will, consciousness, spirituality, and social action and progressive politics. You know, the Buddhist was, he was a fucking commie. Okay.
I do think that, you know, I think there is more of a connection now. I think most of the people that, at least that
I think
are,
so, Barbara.
you know,
Yeah,
progressive,
I think so.
they're into yoga, they're into
Your
meditation.
stuff. Well, you're martial arts. Like, Jesus Christ,
they're vegetarian,
a spiritual practice, you know, for Christ's sake.
So they're definitely there. But I'll look to hear from Jennifer. So you have my information. I'll look to hear from her. And Phil, I'll see you or text. We text all week long. So
well, let's go back and forth and start what we're doing, and to me, getting it specific and what we want to do very specifically to make the next little steps.
Sounds good.
But thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. This was
Barbara
great.
and Phil.
All right.
My brother. We've been together for a long goddamn time.
Long time.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.